"You're just the assistant, stay in your place." He said it in front of a $4.2 million client right before they asked me to sign the contract. I didn't argue. I didn't correct him. I just sat there and waited. Because what Derek didn't know was that the client had already reviewed everything I built. The contract on the table was worth $4.2 million. I know the exact number because I had negotiated every line of it. Not the broad strokes, every line. The payment schedule, the exclusivity clause, the intellectual property provisions, the performance benchmarks, the exit terms. I had spent 11 weeks in email threads, on calls, in back-channel conversations with the client's legal team, building the agreement that was now sitting in a leather portfolio in the center of a 22nd floor conference room in downtown Atlanta with a pen beside it, and a client who had flown in from Boston specifically for this signing. That client's name was Jonathan Mercer. He was the COO of Mercer Aldridge Capital Partners, a private investment firm that managed $2.1 billion in assets and had been pursuing a strategic brand and communications partnership with our agency for 8 months. 8 months that I had managed, not my boss, Derek Holt, me. Derek was sitting at the head of the conference table in the Italian suit he wears for important meetings, performing the confident looseness of a man who believes he is the reason the room exists. He had arrived 12 minutes before the meeting. He had reviewed the contract summary I had prepared for him at 7 a.m. That morning, in a 3-page brief that I had sent to his personal email, because I knew he would not have time to read the full document. He had reviewed my brief, and he was now presenting it as his own thinking to Jonathan Mercer in the way he always presents my work, seamlessly, fluently. With the practiced ease of someone who has been doing this so long that the distinction between his ideas and other people's ideas has become genuinely invisible to him. I was sitting 2 seats to his left. I had been introduced at the start of the meeting as my assistant, Mara, not my strategist, not my project lead. Not the person who built this partnership from a cold inquiry into a $4.2 million contract in 11 weeks. His assistant. Jonathan Mercer had looked at me when Derek said it, a look I had noticed, but did not allow myself to interpret in that moment because I was focused on the meeting. 22 minutes into the presentation, I interjected to clarify a point about the exclusivity clause, a point Derek had misstated, not deliberately, but because he had read the brief, and not the contract, and the brief had simplified a provision whose nuance mattered for the client's understanding. Actually, the exclusivity is sector-specific, not portfolio-wide, I said. The way it's currently drafted, Mercer Aldridge retains the right to engage other agencies for divisions outside the financial services vertical. Derek looked at me. The look lasted 1 second. Mara, his voice was pleasant, controlled, the voice of someone who is performing patience for an audience. You're just the assistant. Let me handle the client relationship. Stay in your place. The room went very quiet. Jonathan Mercer looked at Derek, then he looked at me, then he looked at the contract. Then he looked at me again, with an expression that I would understand more completely in approximately 4 minutes. I sat back in my chair. I folded my hands on the table, and I waited. My name is Mara Voss. I am 34 years old. I hold an MBA from Emory University's Goizueta Business School, and a background in brand strategy that spans 9 years, 4 agencies, and a client list that includes 3 Fortune 500 companies. I am not and have never been an assistant. My official title at Holt Creative Group, the boutique strategic communications agency Derek founded in 2014, was Senior Brand Strategist. I had held that title for 2 years and 8 months when the Mercer Aldridge opportunity came through the door. It came through the door because of me. In January of last year, I attended a business development conference in Nashville on behalf of the agency. Derek had been scheduled to attend and had canceled 4 days prior due to a scheduling conflict. I went alone. I prepared my own materials. I worked the room the way I had been working rooms since I was 26 and understood that relationships are the actual product of every professional service business. At the conference's closing dinner, I sat next to a woman named Sandra Choi, who was the director of brand affairs at Mercer-Aldridge Capital Partners. We talked for 2 hours. We discovered a shared frustration, the particular frustration of people who work inside large organizations and watch external agencies consistently misunderstand the communication needs of financial services clients. I gave her my card. She called me 3 weeks later. "We've been looking for an agency partner for about a year," she said. "Everyone we've talked to doesn't understand the compliance environment. They want to make us look like a consumer brand. We need something more sophisticated." "I understand that problem," I said. "Can I put together a framework?" "Please," she said. I built a 12-page strategic framework in 2 weeks. I sent it to Sandra. She shared it with Jonathan Mercer. Jonathan Mercer asked for a formal agency presentation. I told Derek. His response: "Great work, let's put together a full pitch." "I've already built the framework," I said. "I'd like to lead the pitch." He smiled. "Mara, you're a fantastic strategist. But client relationships are my domain. I'll present, you'll support." I nodded. I filed that conversation carefully in my memory. And then I went back to my desk and continued building the thing that Derek would present as his. What Derek did not know, what I had not told him, because he had not asked. Because he had never asked about the specifics of how the Mercer-Aldridge relationship had begun, was that Jonathan Mercer's team had reached out to me directly 3 weeks earlier. Not to the agency, to me personally. Working for Derek Holt had taught me one thing above all others: credit is not given, it is claimed. And it is claimed by whoever speaks loudest in the room where it matters. Derek was very loud in the rooms that mattered. I had watched him, over 2 years and 8 months, extract the intellectual work of his team and present it as his own creative vision. Not maliciously, I do not believe Derek was deliberately cruel. He was something more insidious, genuinely incapable of distinguishing between his contributions and those of the people around him. He had convinced himself, over a career built on exactly this pattern, that leadership and ideation were the same thing. They are not. I had documented the Mercer-Aldridge project from the first call with Sandra Choi, not because I was planning anything specific, because documentation is how I work. It is the professional habit of someone who has been in enough rooms where the story of what happened afterward failed to match the story of what actually happened. I had saved every email. Every call recording. I disclose recording on all my professional calls and have since 2019. Every draft. Every version of every deliverable with creation metadata intact. Every message from Sandra Choi and Jonathan Mercer's team addressed to my direct email rather than the agency's general account. By month 6 of the engagement, I had 340 documented communications. By month 8, the week before the contract signing, that number was 412, and there was something else. In month 5, Sandra Choi had sent me an email that I had read carefully and then moved to a folder I had labeled, with characteristic restraint, important. It read, "Mara, Jonathan wanted me to flag something before we go further. The contract authorization we'll be seeking will require a signatory with direct project authority. Our legal team will be asking for documentation of who actually holds project responsibility on your agency's side. Can you clarify how that's structured?" I had replied, carefully, factually, in the measured language of someone who understands that emails are permanent. Happy to clarify. I hold primary project responsibility for the Mercer-Aldridge engagement. All strategic development, client communication, and deliverable authorization has been conducted directly by me. Derek Holt serves as agency principal, but has not been the operational lead on this project. I can provide documentation of project history if needed for your legal team's review. Sandra had replied, "Perfect." That's what we needed to know. I had forwarded that exchange to my personal email. I had also, 3 weeks before the contract signing, had a phone call with Jonathan Mercer that Derek did not know about. Jonathan had called my direct line on a Tuesday afternoon. "Mara," he said, "I want to be direct about something before we get to the table." "Please," I said. "My team has had 412 substantive communications over 8 months. 408 of them were with you. The framework, the strategy, the contract negotiation, that was you. We're signing a contract with your agency. But we need to know that you are the operational authority on this engagement going forward, not as a credential question, as a contractual requirement." I was quiet for 3 seconds. "Jonathan," I said, "I'd like you to come to the signing and let the meeting run as it runs. Can you trust me on that?" A pause. "I'll be there," he said. Jonathan Mercer had reviewed 412 communications. He knew exactly who had built the engagement. He had called her directly to confirm her authority. And he had agreed to sit in a room and let the meeting run as it ran, which meant he was there not to sign what Derek expected him to sign. He was there to do something else entirely. "Stay with me." Derek arrived at the office at 8:15 a.m. on the day of the signing. He was, in the specific way of people who have decided they have already won something, radiant. He had a coffee from the good place downstairs. He stopped at 2 junior team members' desks to make remarks that were intended to sound generous and landed as confirmation that the day was already his. At 8:47 he stopped at mine. "Big day," he said. "It is," I said. "Mercer Aldridge, $4.2 million. This is the kind of win that changes an agency's trajectory." He smiled. "I want you to know I appreciate all your support on this one, Mara. Real team effort." "Thank you," I said. "You'll be in the room, obviously. Take notes. If I need you to pull up any backup documents, be ready." "I'll be ready," I said. He nodded, satisfied, and walked toward his office. I looked at my computer screen. I had 3 tabs open. The first was my email, showing the thread with Jonathan Mercer's team, 412 communications, the most recent dated yesterday. The second was the contract itself, the version I had finalized with Mercer Aldridge's legal team, which contained, in Section 7, Paragraph 2, a clause that Derek had not read closely enough in my 3-page brief to notice. The third was a document I had prepared at home the night before, 4 pages. A project history timeline, with dates, deliverables, and authorship notations, prepared with the same precision I applied to every professional document I created. I printed the project history document. I folded it and placed it in the interior pocket of my jacket. Then I picked up my notebook, my pen, and my copy of the contract, and I walked toward the conference room. I was ready. I had been ready for 3 weeks. Section 7, Paragraph 2 of the contract. Derek had read the brief. He had not read the contract. And Section 7, Paragraph 2 contained 12 words that would determine, with complete legal precision, exactly who had the authority to bind the agency to this agreement and who did not. After Derek said it, "You're just the assistant. Stay in your place." Jonathan Mercer was quiet for exactly 5 seconds. I counted them. Then Jonathan placed both hands flat on the table and said, in the measured voice of a man who has been waiting for this specific moment, "Derek, I appreciate you hosting us today. Before we proceed to the signature, I want to clarify something about how our legal team has structured the contract authorization." Derek smiled. "Of course. Happy to address any. The contract requires a signatory with documented operational authority over the engagement." Jonathan opened the leather portfolio and turned to Section 7. Paragraph 2. "Page 23. Would you read it aloud?" A beat. Derek reached for the contract. He found page 23. He read Paragraph 2. I watched his expression process the language with the particular quality of someone encountering, in a professional document, a surprise they are not equipped for. Section 7, Paragraph 2 read, "The agency's signatory to this agreement must be the individual holding primary operational authority over the engagement, as documented by project correspondence history and verified by the client party." The agency principal may countersign for organizational authorization, but the primary signature must be provided by the designated operational lead. Derek looked up. Jonathan looked at me. "We've reviewed 8 months of project correspondence," Jonathan said. 412 documented communications, strategic framework authorship, contract negotiation records, deliverable authorization history. He paused. "We don't need him to sign, we need her." The room was completely still. Derek looked at me, I looked at Derek. And then I did something that I had decided, the night before, was the appropriate response to this moment, not because it was dramatic, but because it was true. I reached into my jacket pocket. I placed the 4-page project history document on the table. "This is the project timeline," I said. "Dated deliverables, communication records, contract draft versions with authorship metadata. It corresponds to the documentation Jonathan's legal team has already reviewed." I slid it toward Derek. He did not pick it up. "Mara," he said. His voice had changed. The pleasant control was still there, but underneath it, something had shifted, the specific shift that happens when a person understands that the floor they were standing on was built by someone else and can be moved. "I think there's been a miscommunication." "There hasn't," Jonathan said, not unkindly. "The way a person speaks when they are simply finished with imprecision. I spoke with Mara 3 weeks ago. I explained our contractual requirements. She asked me to let the meeting run as it ran. I agreed." He looked at Derek directly. "I've been in business for 22 years. I know what the person who built something looks like when they walk into a room. And I know what the person who's presenting someone else's work looks like." Silence. "The contract is ready. The pen is on the table. Mara, whenever you're ready." I picked up the pen. Strategic engagement paused too. She signed the $4.2 million contract in front of the man who had just told her to stay in her place. But what she signed was not the end of the story. It was the beginning of a different one she had been building in parallel for 3 months, in documents Derek had never seen. Stay with me for what she had actually been preparing. The contract signing took 11 minutes from Jonathan's paragraph 2 revelation to the final countersignature. Derek signed as agency principal the organizational authorization the contract permitted him to provide. His hand was steady. I will give him that. Jonathan shook my hand afterward. He shook Derek's hand too. He was professional throughout. He is a $2.1 billion COO. He does not create scenes. He simply ensures that the people who built the thing are the people who hold the pen. After Jonathan and his team left, Derek and I were alone in the conference room for the first time. He looked at me across the table. I looked at him. "How long have you been planning this?" he said. "I haven't been planning anything," I said. "I've been doing my job. The documentation is what it is because I document everything. The contract language exists because Jonathan's legal team asked for operational authority verification, and I answered their question honestly. You undermined me in front of a client. You called me an assistant in front of a client," I said. "On a project I originated, developed, and closed." He was quiet. "What do you want?" he said, finally, the question that should have been asked 8 months earlier. I reached into my jacket pocket again. A different document this time, 2 pages. I placed it on the table. "I'd like you to read this," I said. It was a proposal, not a demand, a proposal. I had written it the previous week, with the help of an employment attorney named Grace Osai of Osai and Whitmore in Atlanta, who specializes in professional services contracts, and who had reviewed my documentation with the attention of someone who understood exactly what it represented. The proposal outlined 3 things. First, a title change effective immediately to Senior Partner and Director of Client Strategy. Not a courtesy title, a title with defined equity participation in new client revenue generated from relationships I originated, retroactive to the Mercer-Raldridge engagement. Second, a formalized project attribution policy for the agency, a written protocol requiring that client-facing presentations, pitches, and correspondence accurately reflect the team members responsible for strategic development. Not a punishment, a system. Third, a revenue share structure for the Mercer-Aldridge contract specifically. 18% of net agency revenue from the engagement directed to me as originating strategist and operational lead. Documented as such in the agency's internal records. Grace had calculated the 18% figure based on industry standard origination fees for client relationships brought to an agency by a non-principal employee. It was defensible. It was professional. It was not punitive. Derek read both pages. He read them the way he had read the contract, but this time I did not think he had missed anything. I thought he was reading with the specific attention of a man who understands, for the first time, that the person across from him has been more prepared than he knew for longer than he realized. If I don't agree, he said. Then I take the documentation of the Mercer-Aldridge project history to Jonathan Mercer's team, and I inform them that the operational lead on their $4.2 million contract no longer works at this agency. And I ask whether they'd like to discuss options. That would damage the agency. Yes, I said. It would. I don't want to do it. That's why I'm sitting here with a proposal instead of a resignation letter. He looked at the document. Then he looked at me with an expression I had never seen on his face in 2 years and 8 months of working together. Not anger, not the pleasant performing patient's expression. Something more honest. You're not an assistant, he said. No, I said, I'm not. He picked up the pen that was still on the table. He signed the proposal. The title change was processed by HR the following Wednesday. Senior Partner and Director of Client Strategy, Holt Creative Group. My name on the agency website under the leadership page, where it had never appeared before, with a bio that accurately described my role in building the firm's strategic practice. The Mercer-Aldridge contract launched on schedule. The first phase deliverables were completed over 12 weeks. Jonathan's team extended the engagement at the 6-month review, adding a digital communications component that brought the total contract value to $5.8 million over the full term. The revenue share structure I had proposed was applied to the extension as well. Grace Osai reviewed the amendment and confirmed it was correctly structured. The agency's project attribution policy, the second item in my proposal. The one Derek had perhaps expected to be the least significant, turned out to be the one that changed the culture most visibly and most permanently. When you require, in writing, that presentations accurately reflect who developed the strategy, you do not simply correct one relationship. You correct the entire operating assumption of an organization. 3 other senior staff members came to my office in the month after the policy was implemented, not to complain, to thank me. One of them, a strategist named Devon, who had been at the agency for 4 years, said, I've had 3 pitches go out in my name. First time any of them have gone out in my name. I told him, document everything going forward. That's how you protect it. He nodded like someone writing something down. As for Derek, he adapted. People who survive in professional services are, by definition, adaptive. I came to understand more clearly after the power between us was accurately calibrated, a better agency principle than he had been a credit appropriator. He was good at relationships in the room. He was good at the kind of confident projection that certain clients find reassuring. Those things have value. He was simply no longer the only person in the building who knew it. We worked together for another 14 months before I made a different decision. But that is a different story. I think about the specific phrase often. Stay in your place. Not because it hurt me, though it did, in the moment, in the way that any public diminishment hurts regardless of how prepared you are for it. But because of what it reveals about the person who says it. Stay in your place is a sentence that only makes sense if you believe that place is fixed. That the hierarchy in a room on a given Tuesday afternoon is a permanent architecture, rather than a temporary arrangement based on who has done what, and who holds what, and what the documents actually say. Derek believed the arrangement was permanent. He had built an entire professional identity on the assumption that the people above him stayed above him, and the people below him stayed below him, and that the system, once established, self-perpetuated. What he had not accounted for was documentation. Documentation does not respect hierarchy. It does not defer to titles or office assignments or whose name is on the door. It records what happened, who did what when they did it, and what it produced. And when a client's legal team asks, as Mercer Aldridge's legal team asked, as legal teams always ask when $4.2 million is on the table, who actually holds operational authority here, the documentation answers that question without sentiment and without politics. It just answers. This is what I want to say to every woman in a professional environment who has been handed the work and denied the credit, who has built the relationship and been introduced as the assistant, who has developed the strategy and been told to take notes. Your place is where your work is. And your work is documented. If you have been doing the work, if you have been in the calls and written the frameworks and built the relationships and negotiated the terms and sent the 412 emails that led to the $4.2 million contract, then your place is not where someone else's comfort with hierarchy tries to put you. Your place is at the table, with the pen. But here is the part that matters more than the satisfying moment with the pen. The satisfying moment does not happen without the 11 weeks of documentation before it. It does not happen without the phone call, where you answer the legal team's question honestly. It does not happen without the 4-page project history you print the night before and fold into your jacket pocket. It does not happen without the work and the records and the patience to wait for the right moment rather than the first moment. I did not interrupt Derek when he introduced me as his assistant. I did not correct him in the lobby. I did not send Jonathan Mercer a preemptive email explaining the situation. I sat in that conference room for 22 minutes, and I let Derek perform the work I had built, and I waited, with the specific quality of patience that is only available to someone who knows exactly what they are waiting for, until the moment when the contract was on the table, and the pen was next to it, and the only question remaining was whose name went on the signature line. And then I let the documentation answer. Because the most powerful professional move available to a woman in a room where someone is trying to define her out of her own work is not a speech. It is not an outburst, it is not even a well-timed rebuttal. It is a folder, organized, dated, accurate, sitting in your jacket pocket. Waiting for the moment, someone asks the question your documentation was built to answer. Know what you built, document what you built, and when someone tells you to stay in your place, let the records show them where your place actually is. Final frame, black screen. White text. The contract closed at $5.8 million. The attribution policy is still in effect. Devin's name was on the next 3 pitches. The pen is still on the table in the conference room on the 22nd floor. Someone else picks it up now. Her name is on the door. Know what you built. Document what you built. Then pick up the pen. It was always yours, if you have ever built something and watched someone else hold the pen. If you have ever been introduced as asterisk, just the assistant in a room you built, leave 1 word below. Signed, that's all. And if someone in your life is sitting right now at a desk doing the work while someone else takes the meeting, send this to them today. Because the documentation exists. And the pen is waiting.